Welcome to the Brand Theory Podcast, the podcast for helping you uncover your passion, realize your purpose, and take the aligned action. Together, we're going to prove the theory that when we live our lives on brand, the possibilities become limitless. I'm your host, Danielle and Lindsay, branding expert and business coach. Let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of the Brand Theory Podcast. I hope wherever you are having a very on-brand day, making choices from a place of alignment and authenticity to be sure that all areas of your life are working together for good in a way that really represents what it is you desire. I have a little brand tip for us to start off this episode. We have an awesome interview with Lindsay Hanson, and before we get into that, I just want to share this quick brand tip with you. So if you've been here, or if you've been watching me on social media, you know we're talking a lot about the brand rescue and about the concept of storytelling and adding that into our current brand and marketing practices. So if that sounds like something you would need, I definitely urge you to check out what the brand rescue is all about. But I want to give you an actionable tip that you can implement today, and it's actually a challenge, if you will. Sometime this week, I want you to tell your audience a story. What do I mean by that? Wrap this into whatever it is that you do, whatever it is that you offer, whether you're currently in a selling season or not. I want you to tell us a story about a time where you were struggling with X in your business and how you navigated out of that, how you implemented what it is that you offer to get yourself out of that. So let's break this down even more. So as business owners, oftentimes what we offer is something that we enjoy doing or something that at one time we struggled to do and figured out a way to get through it. So starting out as a website designer, I had to figure out how to build websites, right? And I didn't just build my own and then start offering the service. I had to then build up some mock websites. I had to beg my friends to let me design their websites for free. I had to build up a little bit of a portfolio, right? So I had to get through that challenge of figuring out X, Y, and Z. Then I could go and not only offer the service, but I knew enough to help people through just offering free value, whether that's to build an email list or just to offer free value, to position myself as an expert in that particular field at that time, all about website tips, and particularly on Squarespace. So I was able to speak knowledgeably to this subject that I had spent so much time learning about. So that story could very well be something that you started your business in, or something that you kind of had to navigate through in a growth phase. And now you turn around and know that so many other business owners must be going through the same thing. And you now offer that, whatever that is, as a service. Maybe that's a coach. Maybe that's a pivot coach. I've seen a lot of those recently, of coaches who particularly help you pivot your business to offer one thing, and now you want to offer another. But tell it in a way that's a very engaging story. So what stories do is they offer us the opportunity to connect with you by relating to you. So if we know that you went through something very similarly to us, or if we know that you went through something that we're dealing with right now, or even if, we both dealt with it in the past, it just helps us connect with you on a very human level. And I've said this time and time again in this season of the podcast, that humans are craving that connection right now. We're not looking to buy something from a logo. We're looking to buy something from a human. So telling this story, and make it engaging, make it fun. Like, think about, maybe your favorite reality star right now, or your favorite housewife, or your favorite fictional character, and how they tell a story to the other characters on the TV show. Like, what is it about them that captivates you? What is it about them that kind of brings you in, reels you in, and keeps you engaged with the story? I'm not saying to be someone you're not. I'm not saying to fake a character, but, help us engage with it. Add a little attitude to your voice if it calls for that. Add a little fun stuff to your voice if it adds to that, if it calls for that. Engage us in this story, and we will be more inclined to not only follow the story, to listen to the story till the end, but if you are telling the story to somebody who is currently struggling with whatever it is that you have struggled with or you are talking about, it positions you as not only the expert, but then it puts you in the position to, wow, they might be the perfect solution to what I'm going through, or they might offer the perfect solution to what I'm going through. Again, this could be something that you sell or something that you offer. It could be as simple as, I struggled with organizing my calendar. I didn't know how to do it. I needed to put pen to paper first. So I created this cool looking calendar that's pretty and it's more not as basic as a printable Apple calendar, right? That we just can print from our Apple Calendar app. It's pretty, it's beautiful, it's got fun colors, you can customize it. And just that, it could be that simple. Just wanting to share with your audience, but tell it through a story. Okay. I also told you guys this season that I would take you on the journey of me wanting to buy a house. So here's a couple updates for you. Yeah, it's weird being an adult, right? It's definitely weird. So I have been in the open house fun little discovery here. So I go on pretty much every day and see what open houses are coming up for the weekend. Open houses are often on Saturdays and Sundays. There's a few on Fridays. And just seeing in my area if there's any I want to drop into or if there's any I want to travel to. So last weekend I was, for Jersey people down the shore, I was visiting family about an hour from me. So I happened to just look up open houses that were in the area. I didn't see any that I wanted to pop into, but that's kind of just an example of how I've been searching about and looking for things. So I did see a couple. One I absolutely loved and one that was really nice, but it probably wouldn't work for the work at home situation. But then I actually also talked to a mortgage lender, which was so scary because they wanted to see all of my business profits and losses for the last 2 years, all of my W-2s that I would have, every piece of paper I could gather, my bank account statements for the last 2 months, everything. And I was terrified handing this over because when you really sit down and look at your paperwork, it's like, oh gosh, I wish I was doing better. I wish these numbers looked better. I want to get approved for more, blah, 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 blah. But it wasn't that scary at all. He was very nice, walked me through the whole thing and what all these numbers mean and how mortgages even work. Then he actually put me in touch with an accountant. I've been just doing my own taxes for the last couple of years, tracking my own income, expenses, all of that. So he actually put me in touch with an accountant, which we'll talk after tax season. But it was just nice to know that he gets where I'm coming from. He told me I'm not doing as bad as I thought I was. And we're going to put actionable steps in place to be able to be approved for the amount that I actually want to be approved for by this time next year, which is what I was expecting, which is what I was wanting to plan for anyway. And I wish I had made that phone call 2 months ago in January so then I could buy a house a little bit sooner. But it is what it is. I'm so glad I did it. So if you're in the same position of being scared to talk to a mortgage lender or an accountant, it really wasn't that scary. And I'm so glad I did it because now I just know what I have to do. Okay, that's enough about me. Let's get into this episode with Lindsay Hanson. Such a good one. So a little about Lindsay. In 2018, Lindsay quit her accounting job just a year into her career in search of something more. In the depths of her quarter-life crisis, she knew she couldn't spend the next 40 years going to an unfulfilling job and punching numbers into a spreadsheet. She knew there had to be a life where she could make good money doing the work she loved while making a real impact on the world. So she sought out to find it. Fast forward 3 years, today she's an online business coach, freelance digital marketer, and host of the Quit Your Job Sis podcast. She's helped dozens of women to leave their unfulfilling corporate jobs and turn their passion into authentic and impactful online businesses. Now she's here to share her journey and help women around the world to know that a 9-to-5 isn't always the path to success. Such a great episode. Buckle up. Here we go. Welcome to the show, Lindsay.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I know we heard a lot about you in your intro and a little bit about your journey, but I always like to ask in your own words, tell us a little bit more about how you got to where you are today.
Okay. I mean, where to start? So
I know it's always such a big question.
Okay. I guess I'll start with when I was back in my corporate job. So I went to school for accounting. I went to business school. I majored in accounting. I got my degree. And I started my career in the corporate world at one of the big 4 accounting firms back in 2017. Pretty much right away, I knew that it was not for me. and that I would be miserable if I stayed there for my entire career. But I really felt stuck because I had no idea what I would do instead. At the time, I was really into fitness, just for myself. Like I had been on my own fitness journey for a few years, and I was starting to like help my friends out with their workout plans and things like that. And I really enjoyed it. And I was like, maybe I would like being a personal trainer or
Mm.
like a fitness coach. And then, I mean, I was following a bunch of fitness coaches on Instagram and seeing that they had these online businesses and they were working with clients online, and working from home. And I was like, that is my dream. Like, how can I do that? So, about a year into my job, I enrolled in a course to get my personal training certification, which I was going through that course while I was still working. And I was going to take the test to actually get my certification in December of 2018, which was like a year and a half after I started my job. So I was planning on quitting a few months after that. And really, my goal was to build an online fitness coaching business. Long story short, I ended up quitting a couple weeks before I actually got certified. And I built my business entirely online from day one. And I got 5 clients in my first month as a fitness coach, which is still kind of mind blowing to me because I had no idea what I was doing at the time. And since then, my business has kind of evolved into life/business coaching. Now I have my own podcast that I've had for a little bit over 2 years now. And I've also done some freelance work. So I have a few social media management clients, and I do some other freelance marketing work as well for other small business owners. So that's kind of where I'm at now, and the last 3 years of my life summed up as quickly as I can.
No, I love that. I always love hearing the stories of how it started and where you are now, because I always
Yeah.
find that it's pretty drastically different than what we thought. Because as we know, business
Oh,
ownership is the most unexpected journey of self-development that you'll ever get in life. So you
I
learn a lot
always
along
say
the
that
way and
too.
just, yeah, you just adjust as you go. Okay, so you help clients in multiple different ways now, but it's originally
Mhm.
started with fitness and
Yeah.
fitness coaching, and you didn't do the certification and you grew it all online organically. How did you kind of figure out how to do that? Was it by watching these other fitness coaches that you had watched?
Yeah, well, I did get my certification. I just ended up quitting before I even had it, which was a little
Oh,
bit like, if I don't pass this test, then what am I going to do? But I knew I was going to pass, and I was like, I can't stay in this job anymore. So I did have my certification, and then I got my certification in December, and I launched my first program in January. And I was working with a business coach, so the
okay.
first thing I did after putting in my 2 weeks was hire a business coach, because I was
Yeah.
like, I know that I have no idea what I'm doing. But before I even did that, I had started posting on Instagram, which was the only thing I was using at the time for my business. I had just started posting probably back in like October of that year. And just letting people know that I was becoming a fitness coach, basically. And I would post like my workouts, I would post my meal prep and what I was eating, and just like random tips that I had learned over the years on my own fitness journey and that I was learning from the course that I was taking. So, what I didn't realize that I was doing is I was building my brand as a fitness coach
Yeah.
for 3 months before I even launched my first program. And I think that is why I was able to get those 5 clients right away,
Yeah.
because I had already been building up my brand just by sharing things I wanted to share. I didn't really have like a specific strategy to it. I was
Yeah.
like, and I didn't have a big following, by the way. I had less than, I will never forget this number. I had 127 followers on Instagram the
That's
day that I
wild.
started posting. And it's so ingrained in my memory because I literally remember thinking, like, I'm going to grow this thing into a business. And it started with 127 followers.
I love
By the
that.
time I launched my program, I think I still had less than 200. Like, it's crazy to look back on, but I think that's the first thing I did was just started posting. And then the next step was hiring my coach, who really helped me to put together that program within those few weeks from the time I left my job to the time I launched it.
Yeah. So you quit before you officially launched.
Yes.
What was
Which
that
wasn't
like?
my plan A, but it kind of just happened. I mean, it's one of those things where like I just had I don't know, it was scary. I mean, I was literally shaking when I put my 2 weeks in, I remember. But I also deep down knew that it was going to work out. So I wasn't scared that it was not going to work. I was scared of the uncertainty around it.
Yeah.
But I think under it all have that confidence in myself of like, I'm not going to let myself down, you know? So it was scary, but I knew I was going to do whatever it took to get to where I wanted to be. And I did have a good amount of money in my savings account. So I felt okay taking that leap when I did. And I feel like it really just energized me and allowed me, because if I had tried to launch my business while staying in that job, I knew that I wouldn't have the time and the energy to dedicate to it that I really wanted to. So that was part of the reason why I left when I did. So I think for me, it was kind of like just that kick that I needed to like really,
I was going to say it's the push you needed.
Really go all in on my business in the way that I wanted to. And obviously that helped it to take off from the beginning, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Similar story. I launched before I quit, but I had, like the random client here and there. It was like a friend of a friend who was doing us a favor type of deal. And then my friend's was moving. Her company was relocating down to Georgia from New Jersey. And she said, "Do you want to come with me? Because you can do your business from wherever." And that was my push that I needed to kind of get started. I honestly had absolutely no business quitting. Something steady. I had some savings, but probably not as much as I should. But it was the push that I needed. And you just kind of, you figure it out. But same thing, working with a business coach was super, super valuable.
For sure.
And something that, you learn so many things from going on your own, but also working with a business coach that you wouldn't, again, have expected to learn. And then you can take those and kind of work it into your own programs. But this kind of leads me to my next question is we both started our business around the same time. Do you think people who are starting a business have it harder today? If you go on Instagram, you're going to start with 127 followers today. It's not that you can't do it. You absolutely can. I just feel like it's slightly more saturated, but what's your take on that?
I mean, if we're just talking about Instagram, I would say it depends. Like, it's not that it would be impossible, but I do think it would probably be harder. But that doesn't mean that it's harder now to start an online business than it was 3 years ago. I mean, TikTok, the reach you get on TikTok now is wild. Like if I had that 3 years ago, I imagine I would have gotten even more clients,
I know.
So there's always more and more opportunities every day. And it really just depends on which platforms you want to be on, where your ideal clients are. But Instagram has definitely changed. Like reels were not a thing when I started my business. Really video content wasn't that big either. Like it was still just like pictures, some videos. They did have stories, but like it's changed a lot. And I think just part of it's keeping up with the changes, but part of it is also knowing like which platforms are right for you and which aren't, because you don't want to spin your wheels and waste your time on Instagram. If that's going to be super slow growth and you're like struggling to reach your people, there might be another platform that's better for you,
Yeah. And I think we're sort of talking about this before we press record about, it's this audiences. And what I always try to teach on here is picking the ways to run your own business that work best for you, that are on brand to you. And you're exactly right about picking platforms that are both going to feed you energetically and then feed your audience energetically and offer tons of value. So love that you mentioned that. So what's your personal best way that you attract clients now? What platform are you focused on?
Personally now, I'd say it's my podcast.
Mm.
So, and it's funny because when I launched my podcast, I wasn't thinking of it in terms of like a marketing strategy of like, oh, I'm going to use this podcast to get clients. But I launched it really right at the point in my business where I was no longer doing fitness coaching and I was really pivoting into life and business coaching and wanting to help other women who were feeling stuck in their job and wanting to work for themselves. So I started the podcast to kind of share my journey and tips that I had for starting an online business, marketing, all of that, those types of things. And I would also share some of the ways that I was helping my coaching clients at the time. And it ended up becoming my best marketing funnel in my business. Like almost all of my coaching clients, I'd say for the past year and a half, have come directly from my podcast. And a
That's
lot of them
awesome.
weren't even following me on social media or anything, which is so kind of wild to me. But that
Yeah,
is
in a
such a
good
good
way.
example of how staying authentic to yourself and what you want to do really it is always and has always been the best marketing strategy for me. And like I said, I wasn't thinking of starting a podcast because I want to get more clients and use it for my marketing. It was something I genuinely wanted to do. And I show up so authentically on my podcast and just share what I have to share and what I want to say. And I do it in a way that really shows my authentic personality.
Yeah.
And I think that's why people can connect with me so well on there. So that I think is just such a perfect example of like
Yeah,
how
it's
authenticity is such a powerful tool for
yeah.
marketing.
And it might be, a catchphrase of these days, but it really is when you really define the term and what it really means to do that for your own self and your own business, your own brand. That's really when you are attracting the clients that you want to be attracting. And just like the same thing when you were saying with you were just sharing on Instagram your tips, little tips and
Right.
tricks and what you were doing. It's almost like the same thing in a different platform. So if you can lead your audiences with this immense amount of value that you clearly have a passion for, it's clearly when we
Yeah.
get the results that you want, guys.
And it's something that people tell me all the time too. They're like, I can tell you're so passionate about what you talk about. They said that when I was talking about fitness and on my podcast, when I'm
Mm,
talking about business now. And that's really what it's always been for me is like,
yeah.
because the idea of just getting on Instagram or getting on my podcast and just trying to promote something is so not me.
Yeah.
And it's really like the promoting things is kind of secondary. I feel like I need to show up and just share what I have to give and say what I have to say. And that's really what I'm here to do. And a natural result of that is, clients reaching out and applying to work with me. But really the number one thing is just me showing up authentically and sharing the things that I am passionate about.
Yeah. And I like that you kind of have had the opportunity to explore multiple passions of your own. You
Yeah.
started with fitness and now you're doing something different. And I think that doesn't necessarily hold somebody back, but it's definitely something that they might be curious about when they're starting a business or in
Mhm.
those first couple of phases of, well, now I'm kind of into this. Is it okay to
Yeah.
change my mind or change my passion or
Yeah.
change what my brain is about? How did you kind of decide to change and what was that process like?
Yeah, it's something that a lot of my clients are similar to me and they all struggle with this too because they're
Isn't that
like,
funny how we attract
I
clients
know.
that are just like us?
I know. And I'm like, it is scary because even now, sometimes I have days where I'm like, how can I have a sustainable business if I'm constantly changing what I want to do? But yet here I am, a little over 3 years into my business and I've changed it multiple times and like we're still here. So I think one, accepting that part of yourself because I've
Absolutely.
always been this way. I like thinking back, I'm like, this makes like I've always been this way. I'll get like really into something, really passionate about it, really obsessed with it for a few months, and then I'm like over it and I never want to talk about it again. And that's what happens every time. So first it was fitness. I mean, I wasn't even doing fitness coaching for a year. And about 8 months into it, I really was like, I kind of don't want to talk about this anymore. But it was scary because I'm like, this is my whole, like, I quit my whole job
Yeah.
to build this business.
Yeah.
And now I don't want to do it anymore. Like, what do I do? But there's always the next thing that I want to do instead. And at the time it was life coaching. That's what I was feeling called into. And it was a really, like, it took me a few months to accept it, honestly. And be like, okay, I need to change this, because this feeling of like, I was starting to feel the way that I felt in my job about fitness coaching. And I was like, I cannot do this to myself. And so it was scary. That was probably the scariest pivot. It's still scary every time though. Like literally just a few months ago, I decided after my coaching clients wrapped up in December that I didn't want to take on any more coaching clients. And I was like, why do I not want to coach anymore? Like what am I going to do instead? And I do have my podcast and I am doing my social media management work too. So it's not like it was my whole business, but I was still like, what? It was just, I didn't know what the next step was. But once I took a step back and really thought about it, I'm like, it's my podcast. Like, I really want to go all in on my podcast. Not that I hadn't been throughout my business, but the podcast was kind of secondary to my coaching. And now I'm like, I want the podcast to be the main thing. So that's kind of like what my current pivot is, which is funny. But I think it's just accepting that it's okay to change your mind and that there's not something wrong with you. You're just not meant to do one thing forever. And I think most of us, or at least a lot of us, probably are not meant to do one thing forever, but we're just fed this idea that success is, you know, getting your foot in the door, getting your first corporate job, working your way up the ladder. And some people thrive off of that. Like some people have one thing that they love, that they are amazing at, and they can do it for their whole lives. And that's great. I just simply am not that way. And if I tried to put myself into that box, I would be miserable. So it's very liberating to just accept that you are multi-passionate and your passions are going to change and you're not meant to do one thing forever, and that it's okay for you to pivot when the time comes where you're no longer interested in talking about whatever it is that you have been doing. And the other thing is, it gets easier every time, because once you have built, like, ever since I launched my first fitness coaching program, that's a repeatable process. Like, I knew how to put together a program, how to market it, how to sell it, how to find my ideal clients online, how to speak to them. And then I just translate all those same skills into life coaching, and then into social media management, and into growing my podcast now. So it does get easier every time, because you're learning these skills along the way that can translate into any type of business that you want to create.
Yeah. And I feel like you touched on this a little bit, or I'm sure you've experienced it at each pivot you've taken, but imposter syndrome. I know that's something that you help your clients with, and I'm sure it's something you have experienced multiple times. Can you give us a little bit of tips maybe on how to overcome or deal with it when it pops up, that pesky little pest?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, and that's another thing that it's kind of never going to go away.
Yeah.
So I think also accepting it, and not trying to fight against yourself when you're feeling doubtful and you hear that voice in the back of your head that's like, who are you to do this? Who are you to talk about this? You're not an expert. Everyone else is better than you. There's a million other people doing it. Why would people work with you? And really it just comes down to managing those thoughts and knowing that they're not true. So part of it, like, it might be helpful to kind of go deep and think about, where did this come from? Like, where in my life have I maybe been told that I'm not good enough? Or when in the past have I felt like I'm not good enough? Because some of it might be rooted in like some deep things that happened to
Right.
you in the past. Like we all have stuff like that. And kind of forgiving those situations and kind of going back, doing some like inner child work if that feels like where you need to go. But I think figuring out what helps you. So for me, usually it's journaling. For some people, it's like taking a walk or talking it out with a friend or a coach or a therapist or something. Whatever's going to help you to really sit down and look at what are the thoughts that are going through my head right now. So the process that I go through, and this applies to imposter syndrome and self-doubt, but also really any negative mindset that you find yourself in, is kind of like write down all the thoughts, like brain dump, or just say them out loud, like get them out of your head and like into the world. Because a lot of times when we just say them, we realize how ridiculous they sound. You know, like if
Yeah,
I sit
totally.
here and I'm like, oh, I'm not good enough, like who's going to want to hire me as a social media manager, right? When I first started doing that. And it's like, well, I've built a whole business over the past, 2.5 years. I've gotten clients online as a fitness coach and as a life coach. And I've learned so much about it's like it's ridiculous for me to think that I can't help someone else with that. You know what I mean? So
Totally.
sometimes just saying them out loud, you realize how untrue they are. But some of them take a little bit more work to look at. So write them down, journal them out, and then literally one by one challenge every thought. Like, is this actually true? What evidence do I have in my life to show that this is not true? And sometimes it can help to like almost think of yourself as if you are someone you know. Like imagine this is one of your friends and they are saying to you all of these thoughts about themselves. Like, I'm not good enough. No one's going to hire me. What would you say to them?
Right.
Because often we treat others a lot nicer than we treat ourselves. And those are just a couple things that usually help me, but also knowing that the thoughts are going to keep coming up at every level. Like it's not going to go away. You're
New
going to say
levels,
to
new
yourself,
devils.
yeah, you're going to say to yourself, oh, I just need to get my first client and then I'll be a real coach. And then you get one client and you're like, well, I'm not a real coach until I have at least 5 clients. Then you
Yeah.
get 5 clients and you're like, well, I'm not a real coach unless I'm making $10,000 a month. And like, there's always going to be another thing, that your
Yeah.
brain wants to tell you why you're not good enough. So just learning to manage those thoughts is huge.
Yeah. No, I love that. And journaling has definitely helped a little bit for me. And I haven't tried the speaking out loud, but I've definitely tried to run the scenario. Like, all right, what's
Yeah.
the worst that can happen? And then after that, what's the worst that
Yeah.
can happen? You kind of see like, it's not that bad. Just get over it. Just do it, and just
Yeah. And
once you
that's the
kind of
other thing
start.
too, is like the biggest, like we could sit here all day and journal and that's great, but the best way to overcome it is just to get started.
Yeah,
Because
one
you're
step at
going
a
to start
time.
posting and you're going to realize you're going to get DMs from people who are saying how helpful your content is, right?
Yep.
You're going to get DMs asking how they can work with you. And so sometimes the best thing you can do is just like, you know what? I'm doubting myself, but I'm going to do this anyway.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think that's super valuable to just keep in mind again as you continually transition. It's going to pop up, but you have
Mhm.
all the resources and skills to overcome it and overcome it again.
Yeah.
So here we define the term on brand as authentically and unapologetically making choices from a place of alignment in both our businesses and our lives. I feel like you've answered this 10 times already, but I always ask this question. Was there a time in your life or your business where you weren't living on brand, and how did you recognize and then eventually change this?
I mean, there's too many times to count. The biggest and most obvious one is really when I was in my job and like I just knew that it wasn't where I was meant to be and it wasn't
Yeah.
right for me. And I was kind of just living based on what everyone else expected of me and somebody else's idea of success. But there's been a lot of times in my business where I think I've made decisions that weren't aligned because I was afraid that I couldn't trust myself.
Mm,
So like there were times where, I wasn't making a lot of money or I was struggling to get clients. and whatever I was doing didn't seem to be working. So then I would look for the answers outside of myself, and I would take a course or hire a coach from a place of like, I need you to tell me what to do.
That's so true.
And I would end up following strategies that really were not aligned for me, but I thought like I couldn't trust the things that I wanted to do, that what I felt like was aligned for me wasn't going to be enough and it wasn't working. So I needed to try a new way. I needed to try the strategy that worked for somebody else. And not that I'm against, and like, I think there's a big difference between investing in a coach or a program from a place of alignment versus a place of fear.
I'm right there with you. 100%.
And misalignment. And so there's definitely been times in my business where I was trying out strategies that didn't feel right for me just because I was hoping to get a specific results. And it's funny looking back on it now because I'm like, it's like, I always go back to my podcast. That's the perfect example. I'm like, everything I've ever done with no strategy behind it, if I'm being honest, has turned into the best strategy for my business.
Yeah.
So now,
well, I think it's that strategy of starting out by just sharing value and doing it because you're getting this intuitive pull to do it and show up as yourself, show up authentically, share maybe a little bit about yourself, and then share value that you kind of like the voice that you wish you had when you were first starting out. And maybe you had it, but this is just a little bit different.
Yeah, I think I had it. And then I think there were moments where I lost it because I was listening to that voice of like, you're not doing enough. You need, and it really was it's all based in like standards that we set for ourselves, right? Like I would have a goal of a specific number of clients a month. And then if I didn't hit that goal, I would feel like I'm behind. I would feel like I failed. I would feel like I'm not doing it right. But it's like, that is a metric that I created.
Yeah.
Oh, if I don't get 6 clients this month, then I failed. And then I get 2 clients and then I feel like a failure, but I got 2 clients. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it really was like, I would spiral into the self-doubt from feeling like I was behind because I didn't reach the goals that I had set for myself that weren't actually based on like what success really looks like. And those were the times where I would make decisions that were out of alignment. But if I had just continued to follow what I was doing from the beginning, which came naturally to me, and just sharing what I was passionate about and showing up and, you know, giving value, talking about the things I cared about, in that energy of like, I'm just here to serve, I think it all would have gone a lot smoothly.
Yeah. I love that. And that resonates so much with me. I feel like that's a very similar point on experiences to what I had too. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. So if somebody wants to know more and know how they can work with you, where can they find you?
Yes. Well, my podcast is called Quit Your Job Sis. You can find it pretty much anywhere you got podcasts. My website is lindsayhanson.com. I'm on Instagram at Lindsay M. Hanson, also on TikTok at Lindsay M. Hanson. Those are pretty much the 2 main platforms that I hang out on.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. I definitely think they're going to find this super valuable, and we'll keep in touch.
All right. Thank you so much for having me on.